Paris breathed like a living thing that morning, slow and proud, its streets humming with carriage wheels and hurried footsteps, its cafes spilling laughter into the air. The city believed it knew beauty. Stone arches, elegant bridges, soft golden lights reflecting on the sign. This was the Paris people trusted. Then a rumor began to move through the boulevards like a restless wind. They said someone wanted to build a tower of iron, so tall it would pierce the clouds. People scoffed when they heard it. Some laughed openly. Others whispered that the city had finally lost its senses. Iron belonged to railways and factories, not to poetry and romance. Gustave Eiffel walked through these streets quietly, listening without reacting. He was not a man who argued loudly. He preferred numbers, drawings, and the silent confidence of calculations. When he first showed the design to officials, the room had gone still. The lines on paper curved upward like a promise no one quite understood. It did not look like the buildings of Paris. It looked like the future, and that frightened many people. Newspapers began printing harsh words. Artists signed letters calling the project a disaster. They claimed it would crush the skyline, that it would be a monstrous skeleton towering over the delicate charm of the city. Cafe conversations turned heated. Some citizens felt betrayed, as if Paris itself were being replaced by something cold and mechanical. Even workers wondered whether such a structure could stand without collapsing. Yet construction began anyway. One winter morning, the first iron pieces arrived at the Champ de Mars. Frost clung to the metal, and the workers' breaths turned into clouds as they lifted beams into place. Crowds gathered to watch, some out of curiosity, others out of disbelief. Children pointed, fascinated by the size of the pieces. Older Parisians shook their heads and muttered that it would never last. Days turned into weeks, and the ground transformed into a forest of scaffolding. The four massive legs of the tower started to rise, each one leaning outward before curving gracefully inward. Engineers checked measurements constantly. Every bolt mattered. Every angle had to be perfect. Workers climbed higher than anyone in Paris had ever dared before, balancing on narrow platforms while the city stretched beneath them like a painting. At night, the iron frame cast strange shadows across the streets. Some residents complained that it felt like a giant cage growing over their homes. But others began to feel something different, curiosity. They watched the structure climb higher, almost impossibly fast, and wondered whether they were witnessing history. One evening, a young woman named Elise stood on a bridge near the construction site. She had grown up loving the old beauty of Paris, and at first she had hated the tower as much as everyone else. But as she watched the workers moving like tiny silhouettes against the sky, she felt a strange pull. It wasn't just a machine. It was a dream taking shape, one rivet at a time. Her brother, a painter, refused to look at it. He insisted it would ruin the city forever. Paris is elegance, he said, not iron bones. Elise didn't argue. She simply kept watching the tower grow. Spring arrived, and with it came crowds larger than ever before. Vendors sold snacks near the construction site. Children played games, pretending to climb imaginary ladders to the sky. Journalists wrote stories about the daring workers who braved the heights. Slowly, the tone of the city began to change. The tower was no longer just a scandal, it was a spectacle. Gustave Eiffel visited the site daily. He walked among the workers, listening to their concerns, checking the precision of each piece. He believed deeply that iron could be beautiful if shaped with care. When critics mocked him, he responded not with anger, but with patience. He knew that time would reveal what words could not. By the second year, the tower rose so high that people could see it from miles away. Travelers arriving in Paris gasped when they saw the iron giant stretching toward the clouds. Some called it magnificent. Others still called it an eyesore. But no one ignored it anymore. Elise found herself drawn closer to the structure. She climbed the unfinished stairs one afternoon, feeling the wind grow stronger as she rose. The city looked different from above. Streets that once felt crowded now looked like delicate lines on a map. She realized that the tower wasn't replacing Paris, it was revealing it from a new perspective. The day the final pieces were installed, a hush fell over the crowd gathered below. Gustave Eiffel climbed to the top himself, carrying the French flag. When it unfurled against the sky, something shifted in the hearts of many who had doubted him. The tower stood taller than anything humans had ever built, and for the first time, even critics felt a spark of pride. When the World's Fair opened, the tower became the center of attention. Visitors arrived from distant countries, their eyes wide with wonder. Some were too afraid to climb at first, but curiosity always won. Thousands ascended the stairs, laughing nervously as they rose higher and higher. The view from the top changed people. They saw Paris as a living masterpiece, and the iron structure beneath their feet no longer felt cold. It felt alive. Elise returned often, bringing her brother with her one evening at sunset. He resisted at first, but when he finally looked out across the glowing city, he fell silent. The light painted the rooftops gold, and the tower's iron beams framed the horizon like the strokes of a giant artist. He realized that beauty could evolve, that something modern could still carry poetry. For a while, the tower became the pride of the fair. But whispers began to spread again. The contract stated it would only remain for 20 years. After that, it might be dismantled and sold as scrap. Many people accepted this idea. They believed the tower was only a temporary miracle. Gustave Eiffel refused to let it fade into history so quickly. He searched for ways to give the structure a purpose beyond admiration. Scientists climbed to the top to study the wind. Engineers installed equipment to send signals across long distances. When radio technology emerged, the tower became the perfect antenna, turning its height into power. During difficult times, the tower proved its worth. Messages traveled through its wires, connecting cities and armies. The same structure that artists once mocked became a guardian watching over the nation. Gradually, the idea of tearing it down began to feel impossible. People had grown attached to its presence, like a friend who had always been there even when they pretended not to care. Years passed, and the tower witnessed countless moments of joy and sorrow. Couples met beneath its arches, promising forever under the glow of its lights. Children visited with wide eyes, imagining they could touch the clouds. Painters who once protested began to include it in their canvases, unable to deny its magnetic presence. Elise grew older, and so did the city around her. She watched as new inventions arrived, cars replacing carriages, electric lights replacing gas lamps. Through every change, the tower remained steady. It adapted just as people did. When it received new coats of paint, workers moved across its surface like ants, preserving its strength for the future. One night, fireworks exploded around the tower during a celebration. Colors burst against the iron frame, reflecting in the river below. Elise stood among the crowd, remembering the days when people called it ugly. So now the same people cheered as the lights sparkled every hour, turning the sky into a stage of wonder. Her brother, once a fierce critic, admitted that the tower had taught him something important. "I thought beauty meant staying the same," he said quietly. "But maybe beauty means daring to change." Decades flowed by like the river beneath the bridges. The tower became more than a structure. It became a symbol woven into the identity of Paris. Tourists arrived from every corner of the world just to stand beneath it. They took photographs, laughed, proposed marriage, and whispered dreams into the night air. Sometimes, when the city felt heavy with history, the tower reminded people to look upward. Its silhouette against the sunset looked both delicate and unbreakable, a reminder that ideas once rejected could become beloved icons. Alice's grandchildren listened to her stories about the early days of construction. They could hardly believe that people once wanted to tear it down. To them, the tower had always been part of the city's soul. She smiled when she told them about the arguments in cafes, the harsh newspaper headlines, and the workers who risked their lives high above the streets. As the years turned into a century, the tower's lights grew brighter, powered by new technology. The Iron Giant carried signals across invisible networks, connecting people in ways Gustave Eiffel could never have imagined. Yet its heart remained the same, a bold dream that refused to fade. One evening, long after Elise had grown old, she sat beneath the tower watching strangers from different countries laughing together. She realized that the structure had done something extraordinary. It had turned skepticism into unity. What once divided people now brought them together. The tower story spread beyond Paris, inspiring cities around the world to dream bigger. Architects began building skyscrapers, engineers pushed boundaries, and artists embraced new forms of beauty. The Iron Giant had opened a door to the future, proving that progress and elegance could stand side by side. When the lights began to sparkle at the top of each hour, the crowd always paused, as if sharing a secret moment. Children pointed upward, couples held hands, and musicians played soft melodies nearby. The tower was no longer just an object. It was an experience that lived in the hearts of everyone who saw it. Even after storms, wars, and countless changes, the structure remained strong. Its iron bones carried stories of ambition, resilience, and hope. People who once feared it now defended it fiercely, understanding that its existence reminded them of their own capacity to grow beyond doubt. The city of Paris continued to evolve, yet the tower stood as a bridge between generations. It remembered the past while welcoming the future. Travelers who arrived for the first time often felt an unexpected emotion when they saw it, not just admiration, but a sense of connection to something larger than themselves. And so the story continued, carried forward by every person who looked up at the Iron Giant and felt inspired to dream a little bigger. The tower had been hated, mocked, and nearly forgotten, yet it rose above every doubt. It became proof that the boldest ideas often face the strongest resistance. Before they are understood, on quiet nights, when the city lights softened and the river flowed gently beneath the bridges, the Eiffel Tower stood like a silent storyteller. Its beams held echoes of the workers who built it, the critics who doubted it, and the millions who eventually fell in love with it. It was no longer just a monument. It was a reminder that even the most impossible visions can reshape the world when someone dares to believe. And somewhere in the crowd below, another dreamer would always look up, see the tower shining against the sky, and realize that greatness often begins with courage. The courage to build something the world may hate at first, but will one day call unforgettable. The night air wrapped around the tower like a quiet promise, and the city seemed to breathe beneath its shadow. Streetlights flickered along the boulevards while musicians played soft melodies near the riverbanks. People gathered not just to look at the structure anymore, but to feel something they could not easily explain. Some said it was pride, others said it was hope, and a few believed it was simply the comfort of knowing that even the boldest dreams could survive doubt. Years passed, and Paris changed again. New fashions arrived, new voices filled the cafes, and new inventions reshaped everyday life. Yet the tower stood steady, watching everything unfold. Travelers wrote letters home describing the feeling of standing beneath it, trying to capture the way its iron curves seemed both strong and graceful at the same time. Painters sketched its outline against sunsets. Poets compared it to a guardian watching over the city, and children invented stories about giants who lived among the clouds. One winter morning, a young boy named Marcel climbed the stairs with his father. He had heard stories about how people once hated the tower, and he couldn't understand why. To him, it felt magical, like a staircase leading to the sky. As they climbed higher, the wind grew sharper, and the city stretched farther and farther below them. When they reached the viewing platform, Marcel stared in silence. He saw the river winding like a ribbon, the rooftops glowing softly, and the people moving like tiny shadows. In that moment, he felt something awaken inside him, a quiet belief that anything was possible. His father told him about Gustave Eiffel, about the critics and the protests, about the way courage had shaped iron into a symbol. Marcel listened carefully, imagining what it must have felt like to stand alone against so many voices of doubt. That day stayed with him for the rest of his life. As the decades rolled forward, the tower became a witness to celebrations and sorrows alike. During joyful festivals, its lights danced across the sky, reflecting laughter and music into the night. During darker times, it stood silently, offering a sense of stability when the world felt uncertain. People looked up at it not only for beauty, but for reassurance. It reminded them that history was long and that even difficult moments would pass. Elise's family continued visiting the tower, sharing stories with younger generations who could hardly imagine Paris without it. Her grandchildren brought friends from distant countries, showing them the exact spot where she had first stood watching the construction. She would smile gently, remembering the cold mornings when workers hammered rivets into place while critics filled the newspapers with harsh words. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the horizon, Elise watched a young artist painting the tower near the river. His canvas captured not just the structure, but the people gathered around it, couples holding hands, tourists laughing, children chasing pigeons across the square. She realized that the tower had become more than architecture. It had become a shared memory that belonged to everyone. Technology continued to evolve, and the tower adapted again. Antennas stretched toward the sky, carrying voices across distances unimaginable in the early days. Signals moved invisibly through the air, connecting cities and stories. The iron giant that once seemed out of place in Paris had become a bridge between generations, carrying both history and innovation. There were moments when storms rolled across the city, lightning flashing near the top of the tower. Rain would fall in heavy sheets, turning the streets into mirrors of shimmering light. Yet when the clouds cleared, the tower always emerged unchanged, standing tall against the fresh blue sky. People often said it felt alive, as if it had its own spirit, patient, resilient, and quietly proud. Marcel grew older and eventually became an engineer, inspired by the tower he had climbed as a child. Whenever he faced doubt or criticism, he remembered the stories of Gustave Eiffel and the courage it took to build something new. He told his students that innovation often begins with rejections, and that the greatest ideas rarely receive applause at first. The tower became his example, a reminder that vision and persistence could transform skepticism into admiration. Tourists from around the world continued to arrive, their languages blending into a symphony of excitement beneath the iron arches. Some came to celebrate anniversaries, others came to heal broken hearts, and many came simply to stand in awe. The tower listened to all of them, holding their stories within its beams. One summer evening, a group of musicians gathered at the base, their melodies floating upward as the lights began to sparkle. The crowd fell silent, watching as thousands of tiny lights shimmered like stars caught in iron branches. For a brief moment, everyone felt connected, strangers sharing the same breath, the same wonder, the same feeling that they were part of something timeless. Elise, now very old, returned one last time to the place where she had first questioned the tower's beauty. She sat quietly on a bench, watching children laugh and photographers captured the glowing skyline. She thought about how her own heart had changed over the years, how something she once doubted had become a symbol of strength. The tower had taught her that change was not something to fear, but something to embrace. As night deepened, she closed her eyes and listened to the sounds around her: distant laughter, soft footsteps, the gentle hum of the city. When she opened them again, the tower stood before her, glowing softly against the darkness. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that the dream she had watched grow from iron beams had become a legacy that would outlive everyone who had witnessed its rise. After she was gone, her grandchildren continued telling her stories, keeping her memories alive alongside the tower's history. They shared tales of the critics who once called it ugly, the workers who built it with courage, and the countless people who found inspiration beneath its shadow. Each story added another layer to the living legend. The world changed faster than anyone could have imagined. Airplanes crossed the skies above Paris, satellites circled the Earth, and digital screens filled people's pockets. Yet the tower remained a place where time felt slower, where visitors could pause and remember the power of human imagination. It was both ancient and modern, a meeting point between past dreams and future possibilities. On certain evenings, when the sky turned shades of gold and violet, the tower seemed to glow from within. Artists gathered along the river to capture its reflection, and lovers whispered promises as they watched the lights shimmer across the water. Even those who had seen it 100 times felt a new sense of wonder each time they looked up. Marcel, now an old man himself, brought his granddaughter to the top one day. She asked him why people once hated something so beautiful. He smiled gently and told her that sometimes the world needs time to understand greatness. The tower didn't change, he said softly. People did. She looked out across the endless rooftops and imagined what Paris must have looked like before the Iron Giant existed. It felt impossible to picture. To her, the tower was as natural as the river or the sky. She realized that the things we resist today may become the treasures of tomorrow. As the sun set behind the horizon, the lights began their hourly sparkle. The crowd cheered softly, its cameras flashing as tiny stars danced across the iron frame. Marcel held his granddaughter's hand and watched her eyes fill with wonder, knowing that the story of courage and transformation would continue long after he was gone. The tower remained patient, carrying the weight of history without ever losing its grace. It had survived criticism, storms, and the passage of time, becoming a reminder that even the most unlikely ideas can change the world. People who stood beneath it often felt inspired to chase their own dreams, believing that if iron could become poetry, then anything was possible. Late at night, when the crowds faded and the streets grew quiet, the tower stood alone against the sky. The wind whispered through its beams like an old song, echoing the voices of workers, artists, dreamers, and lovers who had passed through its shadow. It did not need words to tell its story. Its presence spoke for itself, a silent testament to resilience and imagination. And somewhere, another child would look up for the first time, hearing the story of how the tower was once hated, how it almost disappeared, and how it rose above doubt to become a symbol known across the world. That child would carry the story forward, adding new meaning to the Iron Giant's legacy. The city would continue to change, new buildings rising, new ideas emerging, yet the tower would remain a constant flame in the heart of Paris. It would remind every generation that greatness often begins with uncertainty, that courage can turn criticism into admiration, and that even the most impossible dreams can leave a mark that lasts forever.